ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to bring on our very own Professor Utomi, and to read his citation, I'd like to invite Quadri Hajar Quadri Azizat Adjia to take the citation of Pat Utomi.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's my pleasure to read the citation of Professor Pat Utomi. Patrick Okedinashi Utomi was born in February 6, 1956. He is a Nigerian professor of political economy and management expert. He is a fellow of the Institute of Management Consultants of Nigeria and a former presidential candidate. He is a founder of Center for Value in Leadership, CVL, and African Democratic Congress. He is a professor at Lagos Business School and has served in senior positions in government as an advisor to the President of Nigeria. The private sector, he has served in the private sector as the chief operating officer of Volkswagen Nigeria. Professor Pat Utomi was born in Kaduna. He is a descendant of Ibuzo in Oshimili North local government area of Delta State. Professor Patrick Utomi graduated from University of Nigeria, Nsukka in 1977, where he studied mass communication. He attended Indiana University, Bloomington, Indiana, United States of America, where he got his PhD, MPA, MA. He was appointed Professor of Social and Political Economy, Environment of Business and Entrepreneurship at Lagos Business School in 2003. He has been a scholar in residence at the Harvard Business School and the American University in Washington, D.C. Within a few months of his return to Nigeria from Bloomington, Indiana, Professor Utomi got enlisted by the former Vice President, Alex Ekwueme, to provide consultancy services on some public policy papers. Soon after, he was appointed Special Assistant by former President Shehu Shagari. Professor Utomi was scholar in residence, American University, Washington, D.C., United States of America in 1996, and research associate, the Harvard Business School, Boston, Massachusetts, United States of America in 1996. Professor Utomi also belongs to many professional bodies. He is a member, Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, NIPR, Institute of Directors, IOD, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, and Nigeria Economic Society. Professor Utomi coordinated the establishment of several civil society groups on good governance and accountability, such as Transparency in Nigeria, the Center for Values in Leadership, the Concerned Professionals, and the Restoration Group. Professor Utomi has served in various private sector associations, including the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, the National Council of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. He is also the chairman of Poise Nigeria Limited and the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. He has spoken on issues in the following areas on various international platforms: growth economics. He has spoken on issues in the following areas on various international platforms: growth economics, comparative development, leadership, oil and China economic surge, and growing influence in Africa. He has collaborated frequently with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, in Washington, the Chatham House in the UK. He has also written commission papers for the UK's DFID, including the latest collaboration with colleagues from Oxford on political economy of growth in Nigeria, 2006. Professor Pat Utomi also ran for the presidency of Nigeria in 2011. He has been guest speaker at the annual business club meetings of the Africa Business Club at the Harvard Business School, Wharton Kellogg School, and the TEDx Houston at University of London. It's a pleasure to welcome Pat Utomi to give us a presentation. You're very welcome, sir.
Well, thank you so very much. Let me thank the UNILAG Muslim Alumni Association for the privilege of participating in this talk fest. I want to commend the organizers for the choice of topic and for trying to pull us all together to interrogate what is a very important point. Though tribe and tongue may differ, interrogating Nigeria's nationhood. Perhaps I should begin by saying that I identify in many ways with the chair, Alhaji Femi Okunu, in his difficulty with the word tribe. I too have that difficulty. I often talk about ethnicities, partly because many ethnocentric writers use the word derogatorily. Indeed, one of the, in my view, finest writings in the 60s and early 70s about development in Nigeria came out of Michigan State University, and two professors there, Robert Melson and Howard Wolpe, who were visibly upset at the reference to tribalism and the Nigerian Civil War. And they suggested a concept that they call competitive communalism, in which they said that what was going on in Nigeria was leadership of ethnic nationality groups competing over who would most bring development to their part of the country. And so I identify very much with that problem with the word tribe. However, I would like to proceed on a very systematic and structured way. This is important because a big part of our current crisis, and we seem to stumble from crisis to crisis. You know, when my good friend, Dr. Bugaje was speaking, by the way, I acknowledge all present. I am not particularly famous for protocols because I think it wastes a lot of time in Nigeria, but I do acknowledge all present, particularly the chair. But as Usman was speaking, I just reached out to pull a book from my shelf here that I always like to, African Economies and the Politics of Permanent Crisis, 1979 to 1999, Nicholas van der Walle. You know, part of our problem is that we're permanently in crisis. And so growth and development is being challenged because of this crisis. How do we get into this crisis? Why do we get into this crisis? I'd like to submit that part of the reason we stumble from crisis to crisis is that we have created a certain culture, sadly, triggered by military rule in our country, of an anti-intellectual disposition. In Nigeria, everything you say that is designed to be structured, people dismiss it as na grammar we go chop, that na theory. There is no action without theory that makes sense. Every action starts from some theory. But this anti-intellectual disposition, and I'm so glad Dr. Bugaje's presentation brought it clearly forward. This not thinking things through make us make mountains of very small molehills and has kept our country in a state of permanent crisis, very, very sadly. It is the truth of the matter that the habits I encourage, and I refer to many times when I speak, is one of understanding what democracy really means and what modernity truly means. I mean, I, again, like often to point to a Nigerian scholar who has written an interesting book titled Africa Must Be Modern. And in talking about modernity, one of the things that I always refer to is the work of the German philosopher, contemporary German philosopher, Jürgen Habermas, who talks about rational public conversation. That's what defines modernity. That's what defines democracy. In our country, unfortunately, we seem unable to have rational public conversation. Why is this so? Well, this is so because we are captive of emotions. Why are we captive of emotions? And I'm glad a lot of work, a lot of research has been done in this area in recent times. In fact, it has led to the founding of a center at Harvard University that's called the Center for Moral Cognition. Now, that center is directed by a gentleman called Joshua Green, who himself has written a very interesting book titled Moral Tribes: Reason, emotion and the gap between us and them. When we become hostages of a moral tribe, the emotion that defines it makes understanding difficult even when we're talking. This is why in Nigeria, all you get is a trading of barbs on the internet, insults being hauled around, and we don't have rational conversation that can help us see through the dark patches of the things that we deal with on an everyday basis. And I think that we have a duty, a moral duty, to really elevate our country past that. And this is why the approach that I have chosen to take in this presentation is one that takes frameworks for analyzing human participation in society. I will focus particularly on one, and to show that within the context of that framework, Nigeria is traveling in the wrong direction. And this is really our problem. That wrong direction is pushing us into emotional corners in conversation, where the gap between us and them just seems to be pushed in these emotional bursts. Whereas if we had a rational public conversation, we will see that the things that bind us, the things that we need to deal with, like Usman Bugaje was saying, the real big ticket issues. We are not even, I mean, Nigerian politics frightens me, it annoys me, it irritates me, because Nigerian politics is not dealing with what the Nigerian people need to deal with. It is in these emotional barbs that only deepen cleavages that should not even exist. And I like to make this point. I think that Alhaji Okunu also made it about how when they were growing up, they did not know who was Hausa, Yoruba. This is very, very true of my own experience. Listen, I was born in Kaduna. As a Catholic, I was baptized in Jos a few months after. I grew up as an infant in Maiduguri. I started school in Kano, and the bulk of my primary education took place in Guzo. And then I moved south. I went to Second College in Ibano. I couldn't tell who was Yoruba, who was Hausa. I moved east and went to university at the University of Nigeria at Nsukka. When in 1993, the elections were annulled, I inspired an organization that came to be known as the Concerned Professionals. Now, Alhaji Okunu may or may not remember, but many of our meetings took place in his office because his daughter was our secretary. I did not remember that MKO Abiola was Yoruba. It didn't even cross my mind. I did not think that he was Muslim and I was Christian. None of those things crossed my mind. Why today it is such a dominant thing for young people just totally boggles my own imagination. And it's a function of a number of these problems that I'm about to point to, this not following this. And the framework that I've chosen to use for this conversation is how the Greeks used to think of people in society. The Greeks think that at the base of society are people who think only about themselves. And these people they called idiots. Now, when they make progress, they become tribesmen, tribalists, because they think not just of themselves, but of people who have some kind of relationship of blood, kinship, maybe language and all of that. So these are tribesmen. The ultimate level that you want to attain in society is citizenship. Now, citizenship is a function of seeing a shared humanity. We're all human beings. Then you can think of how these human beings can live in the next generation, like Usman said, rather than how you can use what differences exist in next election so you can win. Now, if you look at that trajectory of travel, our experience will tell you that Nigeria is traveling in the wrong direction. Even people who had approached citizenship are now moving to idiocy with grand speed, where they rush to the bottom. And this has been significantly triggered by the quality of people who became politicians in Nigeria. A terrible, terrible mistake for our country. And I take personal responsibilities from this mess. You know, I mentioned the concerned professionals and the struggle against the annulment of the elections of June 12. When at the end of the day, the military decided, okay, they can't take the heat anymore. Abacha has died, they need to get out. Many in our group involved in a major debate of what we should do. A group of us, led by the now late Waziri Mohammed, said, look, we should go into politics. We should take all these ideas we've been expressing in the newspapers and become politicians to implement those ideas. Another group said, look, we're citizens. We're exercising our citizenship duties. And now that we have literally chased the military out, let's go back to our professions, to our businesses. Let the politicians come back and do what they know how to do. Unfortunately for us, the real politicians of our country, the ones who followed Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who followed Dr. Michael Okpara, the ones that followed the Sedauna of Sokoto, those politicians thought the military was not really going, and scoundrels moved in. And our country has not managed to survive them. Because they moved in, they reduced the quality of the thinking of politicians and politics, traveling in the direction from citizenship to idiocy, to me, myself, and I, the size of my bank account, and the monies I can never even use that they are trying to build up for themselves. This has unfortunately been the wrong path that our country has traveled. And the real big question is that as that drives our country towards a culture of narcissism, of self-love, of consumption with self, rather than the greater good, the common good, what we have seen is that in political life, the goal has been plunder, legal plunder, as Bastiat will refer to it. Frederick Bastiat, writing in the 1840s in France, talked about man's desire to pursue gain without pain. In this desire to pursue gain without pain, man often seeks legal plunder where it is possible. What has happened is that our political life, unfortunately, has become the domain of legal plunder. Our economic life has become so short-term and episodic that we are not creating a great future for our children. This is what has reduced us to the poverty capital of the world. This is why resources that could go to creating opportunities for entrepreneurship and growth is being mindlessly consumed in pursuit of self-interest, and we are in a position today where our country's economy is not competitive. So how do we solve this kind of problem? I suspect that the direction to travel is one, to recognize that education matters. Sadly, if you look at how much we are investing in the country in education, is the needs of the country. How do we stimulate public-private partnership, the collaboration to raise the quality of education so that that liberal mind that Usman Bugaje was speaking to can crystallize in a way that people see their shared humanity above and beyond the games that politicians play with them to be able to get votes for the next election. How do you ensure that people are skilled enough to be able to create value and the quality of life that they need, and not be so hopelessly in trouble? You know, there's a great axiom that says that the peasant, Tony's metaphor, is so deep in water that even a ripple can drown him. When you are in that position, you will take 500 naira and sell and mortgage your future. And this is unfortunately the kind of condition that we have allowed ourselves to fall into as education plunges and plummets in our country. So, next thing, very important, leadership. And leadership also will determine the commitment we have to education. What is leadership? Perhaps one of the best definitions of leadership is a very simple one that comes from a personal effectiveness guru, Stephen R. Covey. It says that two things must be present for leadership to take place. One is knowledge. Somebody who does not know cannot lead because he doesn't know where you should be going. The second is a sense of service. You must sacrificially give of yourself for the good of others. The leader does not invest in the size of his bank account. The leader invests in immortality, that the service he gives may have little material things to show for it, but keeps his name permanently in the consciousness of people long after his body has become pure dust. But we see, unfortunately, in Nigeria, where public life is seen as the arena for economic growth and advance for individuals. And because of that, we don't see the level of selflessness in service that enable us see above and beyond to identify what's in the best interest of society, and then enables us to build elite consensus, because that elite consensus is very important. Until we can get elite across the country who recognize the most important things. All of society might not recognize it immediately, but if there's consensus amongst a certain elite, and they can set the agenda, the tone of social conversation, then society will progressively get itself out of where it is. And I ask myself, in nation building, what models should we pursue? There are many who are arguing today that the models that are available to us are, one, the European model, where every country is literally one ethnic group. People that don't agree with that thesis, and essentially fall back to conversations that started when in 1618, the so-called Holy Rome Christian emperor, where the Germans essentially sent the delegates to Prague, the so-called defenestration of Prague in 1618, triggering off what pretentiously is called 30 years of religious wars in Europe, but which was really a struggle by European princes to forge alignments. That ended with what is called the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. And the Peace of Westphalia created the basis of today's nation state in Europe. Now, one of the things that the Peace of Westphalia preached was that there's no interference in the internal affairs of any state. Now, those doctrines began to unravel, in my opinion, when in the 20th century, we had the Armenian persecutions, from where the word genocide entered our lexicon, the Jewish Holocaust, and so on. And the 1948 Universal Declaration of International Human Rights by United Nations essentially pushed that back and enthroned a thinking of self-determination based on people wanting to stay. That shows you the track of that model. The other model is the American model. The model, essentially, of a melting pot, that everybody just melts into this pot. You know, the British historian Neil Ferguson makes one of the most bombastic statements ever made, in my opinion, by a historian, but which I agree with, that the making of the United States Constitution is probably the greatest work of institution building in human history. In spite of the sentiments of those moments, the framers of the US Constitution anticipated generations of human conduct, the dignity of the human person, this shared humanity, and all of that. And I subscribe very strongly to the trajectory that was projected by the framers of the US Constitution as perhaps one worthy of consideration in the way that we evolve. But these are all based on the guidance of an elite that can build consensus, engage one another in a dignified manner. This is the crux of my current engagement and struggle in Nigeria, that we create this platform for the elites to get together and resolve these issues whether it is in the framing of a new constitution, just talk. One of the things I'm working on today is that we have a live telecast of the best Nigerian minds from across every part of the country interrogating these questions as you are interrogating today. And if we can manage to do that, we will shape a country that can think of economic projections of where we can be as that populous country. Rather than travel the road to Somalia, we travel another path that can bring prosperity to most of its people, such that they don't even realize my neighbor is Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and all of that. I do think that this is the greatest deal we can do to the black race, because the accident of history that put Nigeria together through colonialism was, in my view, the hand of God wanting to give the black man a, if you will, aggregation of black peoples who can take away from 500 years of humiliation in human history. And so, as I begin to try to round up this quick intervention, I would like to say that fundamentally, the challenge of nation building in Nigeria has been the challenge of not systematically engaging what the issues are and talking through this by elites who speak truth always to power. Nigeria, unfortunately, oil did a lot of damage to us. And part of the damage that oil did to us is that it facilitated state capture. The Nigerian state is captured. I don't believe in elections in Nigeria as a farce. It doesn't represent the interest of the Nigerian people, not the will of Nigerian people. It is something that those who have captured the Nigerian state use to manipulate the will of the people and bring out some people and say they are elected. So I don't respect people who have positions in Nigeria because of their election, because I know they're not elected. I know they have just forced and forged their way into public authority, and I've been close enough to the system to know that this is the case. So our country must rethink how its democracy runs to get respect in the world. Because when the politics of power erosion sets in, we're locked in this politics of permanent crisis, and our next generation suffers so much for it. I do hope that your meeting today will help us begin to get more of that elite recognize that they are responsible for the troubles of Nigeria and that we don't need to be where we are. We need to reverse the direction of travel from citizenship to idiocy to moving back to being citizens, where our shared humanity decides a better future for our children. I thank you.